without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first pitcher, Matt Kreutz. Matt is not only an IC 100 winner, he was also a participant in the ICIC Sacramento program last year. Matt's from Oakland, California. His company, Firebrand Artisan Bread, is a bakery, no surprise there. And you'll hear a lot about how they focus on the social impact of their business and not just on the bread. So, Matt?
Do I just hit the... Hello, my name is Matt. I am the founder of Firebrand Artisan Breads, located in lovely Oakland, California. Firebrand is a mission-driven company that focuses on hiring people who are formerly incarcerated or formerly or currently homeless. We believe that everybody is capable of greatness and that working in the service industry is a noble profession. Our job is to create the shared value model that Dr. Porter illustrated earlier by creating a just and equitable workplace that allows everybody to thrive no matter the background. We believe in using the open hiring model and a wraparound service model in order to do this. And what's the open hiring model? That means we don't have applications, we don't have cover letters, we don't have resumes, and we don't have background checks. If you're looking for a job at Firebrand, you walk through the door, and we believe it's our job to give you the skills and the training to become the next leader at Firebrand that we need and that our communities need to thrive. What's the clicker bit?
Keep going.
Keep. Okay.
Yeah, just keep.
Okay.
Figure it
out. Hell.
Just ask if somebody from technical can help you.
Keep going.
All right. Well. Oh. Oh. No, it's not. No. Okay. Great. So I started baking bread when I was 14 years old. The day after I turned 14, my mom marched me to the principal's office. I got a job at a bakery in Chantilly, Virginia, and I've never worked outside of the food service industry. It's what I do, it's what I love, it's the people that I love to serve, and it's the people that I love to be around. Firebrand started in 2008, initially down in West Oakland, moving up to Uptown in 2015. We have a projected revenue of $6.3 million in sales with 85 people currently employed at Firebrand. We have a retail cafe and a wholesale facility in Uptown. 25% of what we do is, this doesn't work either, that's fine. 25% of what we do is retail and 75% of what we do is wholesale, broken up into four main quadrants. We're just gonna roll. Four main quadrants. First one is cafes and coffee shops. Second one is restaurants. Third one is food service accounts. And then the fourth one is groceries such as Whole Foods. Right now our core products are our pretzels, our breads, and our European style pastries. And the problem we have, the first one is we are out of production space. So right now we have 65 people on a wait list because we stopped taking on accounts in July. So we have a backlog of viable accounts looking for our products. The second problem is we have 4 large opportunities with Whole Foods, 3 of which are regional to the 46 locations throughout the Bay, and then the fourth one's a national product rollout. The first one is they want us to take over all the deli breads in all of their sandwich bars. They want us to take over all the pastries in their coffee bars, and they want us to roll out a gourmet donut line in all 46 stores. The fourth opportunity, which is the big one, is we are rolling out a line of sliced packaged breads that will eventually go national by 2022 with other retailers. So this line is 6 SKUs of 100% organic, non-GMO, and 100% whole grain breads. In order to do that, we need space. So we are looking to submit permits in 2 weeks for a 40,000 square foot spot in Alameda to allow us to grow and expand. So with 57% of consumer products in the bakery aisle being organic, we feel like this product is very much on trend, with over 52% of people being concerned with GMO ingredients, and with Whole Foods rolling to a clean labeling program in order to clearly identify which products contain GMO ingredients. We'll be ahead of the curve when that rolls out. And with over 66% of people taking steps to make their diets more healthy by incorporating more whole grains. Firebrand's products being 100% whole grain are very much where the consumers are going. Being 100% organic, non-GMO, and 100% whole grain set us apart, but we're also based on sprouted grains and all sourdough starters. No bread on the market, on the shelves, has all 5 of those things. Not Dave's, not Alvarado's, not Rudy's. Firebrand would be the only packaged sliced bread that fits that bill and where the market's going. So this is going to be the space that we're submitting permits on. This space allows us to create 35 to 40 more jobs in the first year, 45 to 50 more jobs in that second year. And those will all be folks who are formerly incarcerated or formerly homeless. The space also allows us to have a home for the next 25 to 30 years. It's 52-foot high ceilings, totally clear span, and you can mezzanine the spot to get an additional 40,000 square feet. So the more important part is it allows us to scale our social mission. For years, we asked ourselves, how can we create value as a company? How can we add value to our employees? We're seeing all these problems that our employees are facing that are impacting the company, and how can we lean in to really dive in and create this kind of shared value model that Dr. Porter talked about? We kind of done the philanthropy thing, we've done the donation thing. We really wanted to be able to make an impact in our employees' life. So we're partnering with a company called 5 Keys Charter, and they're going to operate a family resource center inside of Firebrand that operates inside but is not connected to Firebrand. So employees can get legal aid, housing assistance, food security assistance, drug rehabilitation services, family counseling, and child care services. We're working with the city of Alameda to expand the number of child care centers that are on the island to provide affordable child care for our employees. We're a 24/7 bakery, so finding child care can be a bit difficult at 2 in the morning. So we're working to help solve that issue. Also, it'll be a place we do all of our soft skills training, our job readiness training, our financial assistance, our financial literacy training, and we'll do our 401k programs administered through there as well. And our goal is to build wealth and equity for all the employees to allow them to also develop and build their skills as well. So our secret sauce, we have high quality products. We have a great brand reputation that we've been doing for 12 years. We have a proven growth trajectory. This is our 3rd time expanding. We've been in this spot before in 2015. We ran out of production space, had clients who wanted our products, and we were able to scale and make those targets. We have blue chip partners like Whole Foods, Four Seasons, the Hilton, Ritz-Carlton, Google, LinkedIn, Twitch, all count on Firebrand for their products. We have great strategic partners on the distribution end and our advisory board as well. An experienced management team that's been around the bakeries for about 25 to 30 years. But more important, we're a mission-driven organization. We feel this sets us apart, ups our retention, and allows us to really create great community partnerships and great value for our staff that comes back to Firebrand in full. We've been growing a lot in the past couple of years, from 2014 to being 1.1 million in sales, going to 6.3 million in sales this year, and up to close to 30 million in sales by 2022. We are raising a total of $10.5 million, $7 million through debt, $3.5 million through equity. The equity is going to go towards working capital and building out the sales team and marketing team at Firebrand. We've got a really great staff, really great managers who are ready to go on the people side, on the finance side, really great production managers who are very experienced and are excited to move forward. Thank you. That's all I got.
Bravo.
If I stay here, do you want to go down there?
There you are.
Okay. There you go. Those don't work.
I'll start.
Yeah.
First of all, you have put your money where your mouth is. An extraordinary commitment that you've made personally. You've demonstrated it. You've executed. And I want to give you kudos. And it's worthy another round. I love the fact that out of water, flour, and salt, you can actually create a business.
Yep.
And that's sort of nice. And Lord knows the ingredients are really cheap. So I got to believe your gross margins have to be really, really good.
Yeah.
One of my questions.
If you use really good salt and really good flour, not so
good.
much.
I love the differentiation. Good for you, Matt.
Yeah.
I do wonder about the model of the business that you have going forward. I believe it's investable. but I didn't see a breakdown as to where you thought future revenue and future profits were going to come from, either on the production side, on the retail side, on the cafe side, as you can read. I would suggest to you that there are a lot of models out there that you might want to look at. One of them is a locally founded entity called Panera Bread, and Panera started with the whole foundation of it being its bread, the beauty of its bread, but it wasn't the center of its profits. It turned into the quick service industry, the whole cafe kind of orientation. And you might look really closely at some of the templates that exist out there, in addition to those people who are like Pigs Fly and others who are have worked the retail, production-oriented and retail side of it. You might actually reach out to a guy like Ron Shaik, who founded Panera. He actually runs a fund right now. I think it's called Third Act, if I recollect correctly. And you might, I think he'd be interested in talking with you. And I'd be happy to make an introduction if that's helpful to you. I do wonder about your mix, the rationale for your mix of debt versus equity. In an odd way, your request for equity is sort of small for a real institutional investor to get involved in. And you might look at what your next round of growth might be and choose to accelerate it and actually ask for more money on an equity side that you're currently looking at right now. But kudos along. You've demonstrated something that is really hard for an entrepreneur to do, and that is stick to it. Stick to the commonality of the commitment that you have for social impact and a profit orientation. And bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others?
Matt, thank you for a very inspirational presentation. And you and I spoke a little bit at the table before you got up on stage. And I would circle back to that discussion. It's almost as if you have two businesses. You have a bread business and a nonprofit, almost. I mean, you are really driving that social justice component. That's not clear on your site. And I think you should take more credit for what it is you're trying to do, because it is such a differentiator in your business plan. I would be really clear about your mission statement, because you have a lot of irons in the fire. You have a cafe, you have wholesale, you have a whole social arm of what you're doing. How can you make that branding crystal clear? Because it's not clear in the title. You mentioned Dave's Killer Bread. I think even a title like that, you get a gist for what it is. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. Firebrand's amazing. I love your logo. I think it's spot on. It's on trend. Make your brand story more cohesive so that people really understand what they're investing in. Could I ask a question as well? You mentioned that you're projecting 6.3 million. How much of that goes back into your employees?
In terms of like how much that's profit, or how much is like bonus structure?
It's probably a very loaded question, but with all of the programs that you provide, all of the investment that you make, do you have an idea of how much you're reinvesting into the employee base? Yeah,
so we made a decision last year so the minimum wage in Oakland is $13.80. We made a decision that no one's going to make less than 15, and then everyone's going to go up from there, and then we were going to try to get to that 18, 15, 19 spot. So we took a hit of about 1% off our profit. I'd say a total, we take about a 3 or 4% hit on the margin, gross margin, and then at operating profit, probably 2% by investing in employees. And that's the kind of that's the push and pull of like, well, why is your gross margin like that? It's like, well, because we do all this investing and stuff, but that we do take a hit on the margins. I'll tell you, as a bank, one of the things that we always look for is being upfront about mitigants. And so this is guidance I'd give to everyone in the room as well. You never want to get yourself into a position where you're explaining after the fact. You don't want to be in a defensive position. So I would get really clear about how much of your funds are going back into your mission, because that's why you're there, is to make money, but to put that money to good use. So highlight what that is and how much that is. And even if it's a percentage or a dollar amount, really dig in deep on the brand story. Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Matt, I love the presentation. I love the concept, and we've had the good fortune to see Firebrand before today. So really impressed with the social ethos that you've built into this company. I think a model like this that serves communities really well can get by without a laser-tight business model. I'll give an analog, an orphanage. How do orphanages make money? From the state, from philanthropy, from other sources. Ultimately, an orphanage might say, well, this is our annual cost, and this is our annual spend, and this is how we cover it. Yeah. I know your business well enough to know that you will attract soft money from philanthropy, from impact investors, and from other sources. But I think an investment group is going to look and say, okay, where is your money coming from and where is it going out? Why, 6.5 million of revenue with 65 roughly employees, the ratio says, okay, you're either looking to grow a lot more so that you have actual profit per employee, or this is going to be more of a philanthropy-based business, or it's going to forever be hooked on government incentives. So I think the key is, is this a scalable rinse and repeat business model that you can blow out 10 times, and then at a certain point it's like, okay, this is a business model that stands on its own, or is a subsidy necessary to keep it going? And either way, it's okay. I mean, so a lot of social impact businesses will require subsidy from now till the end of time. But I think I'd like to see your model really articulate that, to say, this is the gap that we're always going to have.
Yeah. Part of the scaling is that we could mechanize and get that scale, not only to purchase more in bulk, because right now we're kind of in this weird middle zone where we can't purchase a truckload of butter because I can't store it anywhere. Yeah. But in the new space, I could purchase a truckload of butter and get that discount. We could mechanize and get more efficient and then reinvest. But right now we're kind of stuck until we kind of scale to get there. So that is kind of trying not to rely on those kind of government subsidies, but that allows us to create a more sustainable business model.
And I know you probably have those numbers in your mind. It's a point of getting it out there to the investment community. Also, I'd just say, I mean, given that we're in the house of Michael Porter here, I mean, the fact that you are expressing the business in terms of shared value, you think about it as what is your bargaining power with customers? Yeah. What is your bargaining power with suppliers? If you're late on a shipment, is your customer going to be more forgiving of you than they would of Dunkin' Donuts because you're doing something good for the community? Not that Dunkin' isn't, but I mean, I just, do you have better pricing negotiation skills with your suppliers because of who you are and what your company represents? And I think that, companies that are in your space that can articulate that well to their customers and suppliers will tend to have long-term sustainable competitive advantages.
Yep.
Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Great. Well, first of all, I'm just happy to be in a room that's reflective of our country, right? And the fact that we've got diverse people here and individuals trying to do good, I think is just fantastic. To your pitch, I think, one, it's spot on. I think I echo some of the comments of the previous sharks or dolphins, whatever we are this week. And echo the point that there seems to be a lot of oars in the fire. And I think really looking at and fine-tuning which of those things that you're taking on you really want to excel at. There is the hiring piece of anyone who walks in. There's the daycare center. There's after-school programs. There's just a number of sort of things which all require really concentrated and focused revenue streams or philanthropy for each of those individual things. So I think really sort of concentrating and focusing in on there. I'm interested in how much of the 40,000 square feet is taken up by the services component versus your demand for space and growth, and what happens when your business grows more than your services, or your services demand grows more than your business, and that can create some situations. So some comments on that would be great. The other thing I'm interested in is your employee turnover rate, and then what do you do beyond just placing a job when someone who's homeless walks in to try to get employment, and how do you handle that sort of varying sort of situation?
Yeah, and that's why we're reaching out and having that 5 Keys charter come in and run that kind of family resource center. So they'll hold that piece of that, and they'll provide that on-the-job training and the job readiness and those kind of wraparound services, because we're not a nonprofit, and there's a homeless community has a whole set of needs that a bakery cannot provide, but these community service organizations can provide those, so they would focus on that, and they would operate internally but be external outside of their operations of Firebrand. So they would own that piece. So when someone comes in, they would get an assessment from 5 keys. What are the skills they need to build? What are their needs that they need immediately? And then we would build what we call our Learning Ladders program, which is basically just a training plan for a past year in order to kind of tailor that to the employee around their needs. So they get that needs assessment from that Family Resource Center. They would own that piece. We would be focused on what are the unique trainings, the situations that they need given their background. So if we get people who come to us who are 37 years old, never had a job, just out of prison, they have a different set of needs to someone who's coming living out of their car. So we kind of do an assessment, and then we build their training plan based on that. And in terms of the breakdown of the 40,000 square feet, about 4 are dedicated towards the retail cafe, offices, and this Family Resource Center.
Well, excellent. And I think just quickly, so we can allow some time for the last comments, I think better delineating that, because it did sound like you were running the whole thing sort of internally.
Yeah.
And if you're offshooting that to a separate unit that can do that, that's a big difference for me as an investor and what my belief is and where you're focusing and concentrating, so that's great. The other thing I think for those of us who aren't from the Bay Area or haven't been there, In-N-Out Burger pays $19.50 an hour. So it's just different scales down there. So even at the $18.50, you're really pushing it with that clientele, which is great. But they're paying high wages in comparison to the rest of the country, and it's just, again, a challenge.
And that's why we raised our floor, because if Oakland's $13.80, but if you go a mile to Berkeley or a mile the other way, it's $15.
Right.
So we just raised it to 15 just to be competitive, but then we bumped everybody else up to an average close to about 18.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So like everybody else, I think the business model you've put together is very impressive on the sort of outreach and what you're doing for the community. Like, it's very tough for ex-convicts and homeless people to get jobs. I mean, it's a real problem in this country. And the fact that you're doing something about that is great. I think as an investor, so I try to delineate my mind between the do-good and the money-making, right? And so as an investor, I like to stay more focused on the money-making. And like Dr. Porter said earlier, this social thing you're doing, how do you tie that into an advantage, right? And so is that a cost advantage? Is that a productivity advantage because they're more open to learning? Is it more of those people available? It gives you a ready-to-go workforce. So somehow you got to turn that into, the philanthropy is great, but you got to turn it somehow into like, and it also gives me an advantage, whatever that is. You would know better, right, than me on that. And then the other thing I would say as an investor, it's always good to show what the return is to the investor. I didn't see that on a slide. Like, so for every $1 the investor puts up, they get how many dollars back at the end of the $30 million revenue target that you get to. Because again, if we're just talking strictly investing in business, it's the return on the investment that people are going to be focused on. So.
For us, the return is that you get higher retention, you have a ready available workforce. Because in the Bay Area, it's about $6,500, $7,000 to train a new employee and for turnover. So every employee that we keep for past that year is $6,000, $7,000 invested into someone who stays.
Right, and that should be highlighted, right? More so than just a philanthropy, but what it does for you is an advantage in terms of your workforce.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Kudos. Good job. Good job, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Without further ado, the second company that's going to come up and pitch, InvisaWear, is a Boston-based company. And it's one of those products that we were both excited and saddened to hear about, because it's a fantastic product. It's great to hear that it exists. It's very sad that it has to exist. They produce SOS jewelry, and discrete SOS jewelry that will alert your loved ones that something is going on. So going to have them introduce the product, introduce the company. Let's welcome Rajia and Ray to the stage. Thank you.
3 years ago, I was walking back to my car when a car full of guys started following me. They rolled down the window, one of them started yelling inappropriate comments, the car stopped, and one of them started to get out. Although I had my phone with me, there wasn't enough time to call for help. I ran as fast as I could, and luckily, I got to my car in time, and I wasn't hurt. Unfortunately, millions of other women can't say the same. Every 90 seconds in the United States, someone is attacked. Out of the 157 million women living here today, statistics show that 1 out of every 5 of them will be sexually assaulted at some point in her lifetime. This is highly, highly unacceptable and needs to change. This is the exact reason why we created InvisaWear.
Now, InvisaWear is smart, beautiful jewelry with hidden safety technology inside. It's disguised as devices that people wear every day, such as necklaces, bracelets, keychains, anything stylish people already like to wear on their bodies. If they ever find themselves in a situation where they need help, all they need to do is double-click on the back side, and that will instantly send a text to 5 people of their choice with the link to their GPS location. And there's also a free and optional 911 feature that can contact 911. The setup is super simple and hassle-free. All you need to do is download the free app after you get the product. You can set it up with your 5 contacts, so you can choose friends, family, colleagues, whatever you'd like. And then you just pair it once to your phone using Bluetooth. After that, it just runs in the background. You never have to worry about it again. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you need help, all you simply have to do is double-click on the back side, and that will send out this text message that says you need help. All of your contacts can click the link, see exactly where you are on a Google map, and our emergency response can also connect your emergency contacts directly with 911 closest to where you are, shares your location anywhere in the United States, and we're also launching international coming soon.
When we first started the company, we had originally thought that our strongest market segment was going to be young college-aged women like myself who walk late at night after classes. Unfortunately, late at night these days is 4 or 5 p.m. right after classes because of how dark it gets. But we were actually very surprised. We'd get up and we'd be at pitch events like this and we'd say, oh, this is a product designed for young college-aged women. And we would get mobbed by other women who would come up to us and say, well, why is it only for college-aged women? I'm a nurse or a doctor. I walk outside late at night and I feel very uncomfortable. I've been followed. We had senior citizens like my 80-year-old grandmother who'd say, well, I'm always worried about falling, but I don't want to wear one of those big ugly panic buttons. I'd rather fall and not be able to get up than to wear one of those ugly panic buttons. We even have realtors who are showing homes to strangers and runners who unfortunately see the news and worry about their safety because of all the sad incidences that have been going on. InvisaWear is really for any woman or man who wants to protect themselves. We actually just recently launched a black unisex keychain, and we launched it specifically because we had so many men reaching out on a weekly basis asking, hey, I feel uncomfortable too sometimes. Can I get something for me as well? InvisaWear is part of the smart personal safety and security devices industry. The industry is currently valued at $20.8 billion globally, and it's growing at a healthy 8% compound annual growth rate. With businesses, it's always very important to remain focused. Although we do have a variety of different audiences, we've chosen to first begin by focusing on the real estate market. The reason we've been doing that is because it's one of the most dangerous professions, and unfortunately there's been so many notable cases of assault that have caused widespread fear in that industry. But the second reason, and the more important reason as to why we've started focusing on that market, is because they're in that age where they've got daughters who are in college and parents who are seniors. So we sell 2 or 3 units versus 1 to that market segment. Like Ray said, we're also in the process of releasing a free update to the app that will allow it to work internationally. Unfortunately, a lot more countries outside of the United States are so much more dangerous. My parents are both from Egypt, and man or woman, you can't walk outside there without being worried about your safety and being worried that somebody is gonna steal your car or kidnap you and steal your organs. It's super sad.
So all of the products that are currently on the market, most of them, like Rajia mentioned, they're big, bulky panic buttons. They're not really disguised as jewelry. So for someone who's a college-age student or women, they don't want to wear those big, bulky panic buttons. Another reason is they don't have the contact 911 feature. That's one of our biggest differentiators that all of our customers love, is our ability to contact 911. We also don't charge any monthly fees or subscriptions. Typically, you're paying a service for someone to sit in a call center 24/7, and they're just waiting to call 911 for you on your behalf. Our proprietary technology can connect directly with 911, so you don't have to pay those monthly service fees, which many of our customers love. The only other one that is jewelry is NIM ring. However, it is bulky and it can contrast with other types of jewelry, so many people don't really love to wear them. We also try to consider Apple Watch just because we don't consider them a direct competitor because they're not specifically for safety. Most people buy an Apple Watch for multi-purpose use if they're doing fitness tracking, other types of things. Many of our customers actually have an Apple Watch, so we find that they love the security of our piece. It's designed specifically for your safety, so you know that it's reliable. So that's why we put them in there. However, we don't consider them a direct competitor.
Yeah. Going back actually to the story I just shared with you. So when I was back in my car, thankfully safe, the first thought that crossed my mind was I'm going to buy a safety device for myself and every single woman I care about in my life, and I don't care how much that safety device costs. And as I was looking online, everything was a big ugly panic button similar to Roar. And I remember looking at Ray and saying, Ray, this doesn't even make sense. My grandmother just turned 80 and we can't even get her to wear an ugly panic button. Why are all these companies trying to market them to young women or any woman at all? So we started the company because none of the other competitive solutions out there worked for us or our families or the customers that we were talking to as well. We're very excited. We had our first patent get approved not too long ago, and we have a second one that's about to get approved. One of the parts of coverages that we are covering is how our proprietary technology works directly with 911 without forcing you to pay high monthly fees or subscriptions.
And we started out 3 years ago. We were in development for about 2 years. We initially launched our go-to-market strategy by launching a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. We set a goal for $20,000, which we were able to meet in less than a week, and we ended up doing double our goal by the end of the campaign, which we were very excited about. We were also one of the very few campaigns that met our deadline for when we were going to ship all our products. So we shipped all of our products on time within 6 months. We've been on the market for about a year now, and we're very excited. We've saved 5 lives this past year, so we're excited to keep going. Thank you so much. And right now we've been doing a lot of, most of our techniques are with branding, so we find that we don't like to scare people into buying our products to make them think that, oh, if you don't have this, you're gonna get attacked. So if you look online on our social media, all of our branding is about positivity, and that's what we find our customers love. We do social media advertising, influencer marketing, email marketing. We have a blog, press outreach. Most of our success has actually been through organic press. One of the stories where we had saved someone's life, it was local. It was actually featured on 3 different news channels in Boston, and that we've just blown up after that. So press is amazing for us, and we're trying to grow. And to scale, we're really trying to find different types of partners. So jewelry partners, someone who's like Alex and Ani or Pandora, we'd love to partner with them, create a custom piece, and they could design it, and then we could put our technology inside, sell it to their existing customers. Another great partner for us could be a security contractor, so someone like ADT. They are already selling to safety-conscious people, protecting your homes. what about protecting your family when you're not at home? So that'd be another great partner for us as we scale.
Yeah, exactly like Ray said. In terms of growth and scaling, we've also planning on getting a lot of national exposure. So last week we were on the front page of Good Morning America, which was a super exciting opportunity for us. And we've been featured on ABC, CBS, WBZ. So we're hoping to continue that national exposure and getting a lot of organic sales. Of course, growing will involve our international release. That'll get us a lot more exposure as well organically. On average, we get between 1 to 3 inquiries of people finding us from other countries who are begging, hey, can you please ship to us? How can we buy this product? We're willing to pay $300 or $400 versus what the product retails for $100. Like Ray said, big partnerships, and one of the biggest things that's extremely important for us is continuing to innovate and create new products. We get a lot of requests for some special items that we'll talk about more in the future. We have an incredible team. My background, I have a dual degree in electrical engineering and computer science. Fun fact, I actually declined an opportunity with Google to work on InvisaWear full time. It was very hard to turn down because it was a 6-figure opportunity, but I just felt like I had a moral obligation to do something and to help decrease these awful statistics. Ray's got an incredible background as well. He specializes in firmware and hardware, and he was at Dell before he joined InvisaWear, started InvisaWear, I should say. We have 5 other wonderful team members who each have plenty of experience in their fields. Christina does sales, Kim does marketing, Scott does finance. Nofel, he helps us with strategy, but he actually sold a successful safety device company in the past. So he had a personal safety devices company where it was a panic button and it got acquired for an undisclosed amount. So, so he helps advise us. And then Kareem helps with operations. We also have an incredible mentor team who each has 20 to 30 years of experience in their industry.
So one of them, Louis Pedrosa, he's been a mentor to us since the very beginning. He's actually the president of the manufacturing facility that we use. So all of InvisaWear products are actually made right here in Massachusetts, so we're very proud of that. And he's been able to give us a lot of advice and guidance on being able to scale both manufacturing-wise and also business-wise. We also have great legal advice, so we were able to get our patent approved. We filed for a continuation patent, so we've got other ideas that we plan to launch in the future, and then other mentors that help us with strategy, marketing, and business as we continue to grow.
We're super proud of our reviews. We've got over 100 5-star reviews on our website alone. And like Ray said, we know of 5 lives that we've helped save. One of them was a young woman who was involved in a serious car accident. Her car had hit some black ice and it spun out of control. She was stuck in the car and her phone got thrown in the crash and she couldn't find it, like most car accidents. She had remembered that she had a gold flower keychain in her pocket that her aunt had gifted her just 1 week prior. When she called our company, she said that she was lying on the ground saying, "Dear God, please, please let this help. Please let it get me help." And when she double pressed it, it immediately texted her family. Her dad was the first to get the message. He saw the location on the highway, and he knew immediately that this must be some sort of car accident. He answered our phone call and spoke to 911, and they were able to get her the help she needed within minutes, and she was able to make a full recovery. We also helped a senior who fell and couldn't get up. She called the company and said, "Thank you, because I wouldn't have been caught dead wearing one of the ugly buttons on the market." Just last week, actually, we found out we helped a woman who had a medical emergency. She had a pancreatic attack. We also helped a woman who was assaulted. She didn't feel yet comfortable explaining exactly what happened, but she sent a message saying, "Thank you for saving my life. Yesterday I was attacked and I was able to use your device to get help. I'm not yet ready to share exactly what happened, but when I am, I would really like to tell you more." So those are some of the various people we've already been able to help, and we're hoping to be able to help even more people. We have very healthy margins, between 60 to 80% per SKU. We've previously raised $750,000 in our first round. Some of that was convertible notes, some of it was loans. We're now raising a $3 million round to help us fund big partners, increase our team, and spend on marketing. We really believe that we can one day become a $100 million company. We have seen other jewelry companies, for example, Alex and Ani, they're an $800 million company. And so are other companies like Ring, for example, who just got acquired by Amazon for $1 billion. If you watch their QVC pitch in which they sold 100,000 units, it was almost identical to InvisaWear's hopefully future QVC pitch because it was aiming to protect your loved ones. Investors always ask what are our exit options, how do they make their money back? There's a few different ways, and one of the ways that we think is most viable would be an acquisition. Somebody like Amazon, like I just mentioned, acquired 2 companies in the safety space, Ring for $1 billion in Blink Security. We actually have a special relationship with Amazon. We're a part of their exclusives program. So they had reached out to us and said they want to make friends with some of the new guys in the space. So excited to tell you more about that if you have any questions, but we know time's up and I wanted to leave you with enough time. So thank you to everyone for listening to our pitch. We really appreciate it and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for that amazing presentation. I have many, many questions, but I could take up the whole 15 minutes. So first, let me just give some feedback. I think your deck is outstanding.
Thank you so much.
The marketing is clean. The branding is clear. I really understand what you're trying to do beyond just the fact that the name is great.
Thank you.
Your narrative is really strong. You have a clear idea of who you are helping today, who you can help. I noticed that you had an option for kids. That was where my head was going, is how can we scale? Because right now it's one product. It has different chains, but it's still one product. Exactly. So I think being really clear about what the scalability of this singular product is. I went on your website before and noticed that it does. I saw, I think on your comparison slide, you had that yours is designed for, it's designed for 1 year. I think it would behoove you to include the replacement cost in your deck just to put it up front. But it doesn't put you out of the space because I did a little math, and if at $129 retail plus $65 a year replacement cost for the battery, initially you go, oh my God, I have to pay 50% for every other year. But it breaks down to $650 a month for 5 years.
Exactly.
So $650 a month for personal protection is a price I'm willing to pay, but I would not make that leap on my own. I'd get sticker shock. So I do think really, if you're, depending on who you're presenting to, just making sure that you address the fact that it is a 1 year, because you're gonna get that question, is how long does it last? What's your failure rate? And how many of these do you have to replace? Where does that come out of your pocket? So being able to articulate that, I think, strengthens your presentation, not diminishes it.
Thank you so much.
You're right in the right market in this, post, and I'm reticent to use the word post, but the Me Too era. Great connection to what this can do. And I love that you said you don't want to scare people. I think that's a cheap trick. When you scare people into buying things, that tells me there's not enough value behind what you're really presenting. You avoid that intentionally, and so kudos to you.
Thank you.
Loved your data, loved your numbers, would like to know more. I think you glossed over that a little quickly for an investor presentation. I want to see where my money's going. I'm glad you gave me my exit strategy, but I do want to see how you're investing the money, because so far so good, but where is it going next?
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And we're more than happy to take the conversation offline as well and dig more into financials. We didn't want to share everything publicly, so that's why we kind of glossed over it, but I love your feedback. Thank you so much. It means a lot to us as well that you looked up the product. And thank you. Any other questions or feedback as well? We appreciate the feedback.
I was really impressed. I mean, you're able to articulate the use case, and people immediately understand. Okay, great. This is a wonderful product. It's timely. It speaks to a human fear without evoking that fear. I mean, you can say just high level what it is, and everybody knows what you're talking about. Interesting to see that you can make it for $48.50. I mean, I think people can understand this is a good product. It's well timed. If you think about, cheap analogy, but like Brita water filters. They tell you when they need to be changed.
Right.
This little device, I don't see a little light that says, hey, your 12 months is coming up here. So
the app actually notifies you.
Got it.
So
Okay.
the app tells you when it's time to replace the charm. And we actually are in the process of launching some higher end charms that have higher retail values. So some of our customers actually love the battery, like you said. So it's designed to last a year, because when we did our market discovery and we spoke to people, people's biggest concerns was that their safety device is going to be out of battery because they forgot to charge it. But they were also worried that they would forget to change the battery. So they were saying if they could replace it and get a different look after a year, they'd be willing to pay money for it. So that's kind of one of the reasons we did that. So that's kind of how we remind them.
And then the last point is really around barriers to entry. I mean, you mentioned you got your patent, which is wonderful. It's great that you have a patent, that there's some degree of protection, but it's really hard to imagine that there's a product patent out there that stops other people from going directly to 911. Like, really? Like, I can't go directly to 911 unless I have a mobile phone subscription? I mean, it seems like you can't block people and you can't block companies from offering a service of going directly to 911. So, you know, the skeptic in me was kind of saying like, this might be easier to copy than the plan purports. So,
yeah, thank you. And to answer that question a little bit, there's a lot of laws and regulations around how you can connect to 911. So what our proprietary technology does is that we have a partnership with a company that makes all the software on the 911 dispatcher centers. So our technology routes you to the correct 911 dispatch center, and it shows all of the additional information, like your first name, last name, medical conditions on their screen. So that's kind of what the patent covers versus just contacting 911. But thank you so much. That's wonderful feedback.
Fantastic. You may have may reunite with Google at some point. Turn them down now. I think you're aware they made a large purchase with Fitbit just in the last couple of weeks. And so wearables, I think, is a hot topic. My questions really are more along the lines of sort of how does it sort of work, right? So one question is, how do you handle false alarms? You have a baby and you're holding a baby or a kid and they grab it and hit buttons. They like to grab things. Right. Sort of what happens when that's triggered. Sure. And kind of understanding what happens there. The other thing I think is somewhat of an issue that I'm having with this is that because it's not an audible sort of alert, the attacker doesn't know that someone has been contacted and will more likely continue to assault, because they're not sort of shaken off by either alarm or a light or something like that. So you're still kind of vulnerable until someone shows up, which is my other question, which is what happens with 911 and the families? They know there's an alert. They don't know if it's a fire. You know, they were able to guess the car accident, an attack. So you're kind of entering in unprepared, which is what our professional 911 police and fire do. But you're kind of going into a scene unknown. And so I think that that's somewhat of a challenge as well. On the positive side, which I'm hoping that's positive feedback to make adjustments, I do believe there's a point for some higher end, Tiffany's, other sorts of things where you can really sort of charge a real premium for some of the jewelry. And I think they would love to incorporate something like that into their product line. And so I think that's phenomenal. I'm also concerned about data protection. Who's alert and knows that I'm walking around and my wife is walking around somewhere? Who has access to that? How is that encrypted and protected?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So 3 questions. First one was accidentals, which is our favorite question. It's actually designed, I'll let each of the judges double press it as well if you'd like. It's a very firm double press, so it's not easy to accidentally activate. So just pushing it like this isn't. We actually have a lot of moms. So we have 10,000 devices on the market right now, and we only know of 1 accidental. So that kind of shows that accidentals are very rare. You're all welcome to double press it as well if you would like.
But there's also an option to cancel it, so your phone, you'll start to get a phone call. So you have the option to cancel it in the app, and that's customizable too. One of the other questions I think you had was about the attacker not knowing if an alert was sent out. There is a customizable feature. You can set it. If you'd like, it can start to play a loud alarm on your phone. So that's optional if the user wants to opt into that, but we don't force you. A lot of our customers love the discreetness of it. So to answer your question for that, a lot of our customers love that. Was there another question?
The third question was regarding what if the emergency contacts don't know what the situation is, and that's a great question. A lot of times emergency contacts don't know what the emergency situation is, so the 911 feature comes on by default, and we highly advise against people turning it off. The reason being, like you said, 911 dispatchers are the ones who are best prepared to respond to an emergency situation. So we connect emergency contacts with 911, and the emergency contact, when they're added, gets a link on how to respond during an emergency. What they're instructed is to tell the 911 dispatcher any information that they might know. So for example, my daughter's a college student at 6 p.m. This is about the time she leaves classes. Or my wife's a real estate agent. She was showing a property. Unfortunately, 90% of attacks happen nearby somebody that you know who could have helped you, who had some background information as to what you were doing. That information helps the police prepare into what they're going into, but it doesn't necessarily cover all situations, but 911 dispatchers kind of know that, okay, we know how to handle a situation even if we don't know what they fully are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
The third and final pitch company, Parity Homes, is a real estate development company that focuses on development without displacement, and that was created out of a response to gentrification. Now, the one thing I will mention is you've all those of you who have participated in the program have constantly heard us say that we traditionally do not work with startup companies. And every so often, a company comes along or a nominator reaches out and says, here's a company you need to make an exception for. You need to have them in your program, you need to see them, and they need you to grow next. Bree is one of those companies, so she will not be speaking from 3 or 5 years of experience, but I think it's something that we saw as an incredible opportunity to learn from Bree and her pitch.
So good afternoon, my name is Bree Jones. I'm so happy to be here. I'm the founder of Parity, and when I was putting together this presentation, I really wanted to focus mostly on the numbers because I know it's a Shark Tank pitch, but I realized that I can't tell the story without first starting with history. And so just with a show of hands, who knows what this is a representation of?
It's called redlining.
Okay, so that's surprising. It's kind of disappointing. About maybe 5% of the people in this room. So it's a map of redlined Baltimore. And what redlining essentially was, it was a federally mandated policy by the US government that essentially required banking institutions, insurance institutions to take maps of major metropolitan cities and determine the racial composition of those neighborhoods. And so for predominantly white neighborhoods, which are highlighted in blue and green, they were considered favorable. And so they were given favorable terms for mortgages, like low interest rates, low down payments, a lot of time to repay your loan. But for neighborhoods that were predominantly black, they took a red marker and outlined it in red, which is where we get the term redlining, and that essentially meant that banks would not loan or lend into those neighborhoods. So if you were a black family looking to buy a home, banks essentially would not originate a mortgage with you. Or if there were financing agencies that did, they would give you predatory lending terms. And so this has contributed to what we see today. This is my neighborhood in Baltimore that I'm working in. It's really important to call it what it is, an intentional disinvestment of black communities. This is not accidental. And this happened across the nation. These are just some other maps of other cities that were redlined. And it's created the wealth disparity, the racial wealth disparity that we've been talking about today. So 72% of white households own their homes compared to just 42% of black households that own their homes. And home ownership is one of the greatest generators of household wealth. 66%, so about 2/3 of your wealth comes from the equity that you have in your home. And so it's no surprise that white households have a median household income of about $171,000, whereas black households have just $17,000 in household wealth. And when oftentimes they say that education is the key to ending this, but when you hold for education, white households that have less than a high school degree still have more wealth than black households with college degrees. And if we stay on this trajectory, the median household wealth for black families by 2053 will be $0. And so this is why this is so important. So just about my story, I'm from the Bronx, New York originally, BX, born and raised. But my mom, she moved us up to New Rochelle, which is just right above the Bronx because it was one of the last mixed income, mixed race, affordable places where you could raise your kids but also give them a good education. But unfortunately, New Rochelle and the Bronx are now undergoing extreme gentrification. So there's a big developer right now in my neighborhood who is in the process of developing 2,000 luxury rental apartments in our predominantly low-income neighborhood where people are living below the poverty line, and yet these luxury rental apartments are starting at $2,300 a month for a studio. And so for 7 years, I worked on the side as a community organizer and advocate, trying to make things equitable. I had been saving up at the same time to purchase my own house. I decided to use those funds to purchase an abandoned property and convert it into 3 families and preserve affordable housing in my neighborhood. So I used all of my own equity, took out my own construction loans. I acted as my own general contractor, overseeing the permitting and the scheduling, and worked alongside the workers in the house that were helping me with this project to really learn how this is done, because I wanted to continue to preserve affordability in our neighborhoods where so many times we're pushed out. And so I'm really proud to say that I now have 3 families living in this house who are paying below market rate rent just because I decided to not charge them an arm and a leg. It's really that simple. And during that time, I got a lot of bumps and bruises, and it's hard, it looks nice, but there are a lot of things that went wrong in the process. I had also been working on Wall Street. I started my career at Morgan Stanley, went on to work at Point 72 Asset Management, formerly SAC Capital, working in predictive analytics, and then I went on to work in venture capital. Anthemis Group is a small fintech seed and Series A venture capital firm. But all of this combined showed me that there were a couple of things wrong with the industry. Aside from traditional real estate being highly extractive and harmful to communities of color, the real estate development industry has largely missed this amazing opportunity for creating entry-level affordable home ownership opportunities. They focused mostly on rentals. And the second is that home buyers no longer want to live in the suburbs. They want to come back into the inner cities and have walkable experiences. And that distressed communities in the inner city have the most intrinsically valuable housing and land, and yet they're oftentimes overlooked for investment. And when they are targeted for investment, it's oftentimes at a very high human collateral. And so Parity is this is the company I'm founding. It's an equitable development company. I moved down to Baltimore to scale my impact, and I'm working on acquiring several blocks of abandoned properties to rehabilitate and then sell affordably to first-time home buyers, but particularly people who have been excluded from the homeownership process through things like redlining. And so I'm looking today for a $1 million promissory note to acquire 96 abandoned buildings across 10 contiguous blocks and offering investors an 8% annualized preferred return over 8 years. And this is a significantly undervalued transit-oriented development opportunity with significant social impact. So I'm focused in West Baltimore. I don't disclose the neighborhood, but this is the radius. It is just 5 minutes walking to the West Baltimore MARC station, which takes you to Washington, D.C. in under an hour. It is just 3 to 5 minutes driving to downtown Baltimore. There is the $2.6 billion Port Covington development happening in South Baltimore, which is being led by the CEO of Under Armour and his real estate development company. There's the University of Maryland, which is a big anchor institution who's continuing to expand westward. And Park Heights is undergoing a $100 million city and state-led development project. So West Baltimore, now is the time. And Kaiser Permanente, also in the room, is expanding its presence in Baltimore. And so I'd really love to talk more with you guys. This is the 10-block area. I chose these 10 blocks strategically, building off of strength. I also live in one of these houses, but I walked house by house and said, okay, this is vacant, matched up with city vacant data, and so there are 96 vacant buildings across these 10 blocks. This is one of the natural assets and beautiful features that if you were anywhere in Brooklyn, New York, the houses in this neighborhood would be going for millions of dollars. Yeah. And this is the block right contiguous to the park. It's actually pretty healthy, mostly homeowners, but when you walk just 2 blocks down, this is what it begins to look like. And so the vision again is to acquire them, rehabilitate them, bring in homeowners who we know inject life into communities and move forward. So some high-level elements, mostly homeownership. There will be some affordable rentals because we know not everyone is ready to own. Long-term vision is to do some ground new construction, storefronts and retail space, green space, streetscape. So what's really important here is that Parity begins to reverse trends around Black household wealth. So in just 5 years, our buyers will have accumulated $43,000 in household wealth through owning a home. In 10 years, $63,000. And assuming very conservative appreciation values, $200,000 in household wealth over 30 years. That's what owning homes does. And I would love to expand into other cities once we prove our pilot in Baltimore. So just in terms of traction, I moved to Baltimore a year ago, and since then, just my personal network has blossomed. These are 6 people who are now my friends, but who also want to be the first to move into the neighborhood. We really would describe ourselves as part of a demographic that's commonly overlooked as a viable consumer base, but we're really interested in cooperative economics, which spreads and reduces the risk and amplifies our buying power. And we're social justice oriented. We're putting our money where our mouths are, and we want to be in spaces that reflect us and our cultural values. And so the group of us, actually, let me go back really quick. So the group of us texted out, the 6 of us texted out to our friends, hey, is anybody interested to hear what we're working on? If so, come out. We thought we might get 20 people. We ended up getting 100 people who RSVP'd. 60 people showed up, and 52 people are now going through the pre-qualification and pre-approval process. So I'm pre-selling these homes. And so my hope is that if I, just for conversion rate, get 30 people pre-sold just from that initial text message, that's a really strong indication that there is a market opportunity here. And I've partnered with M&T Bank that has a really great CRA mortgage lending team that's now beginning the process to pre-qualify all of these folks, in addition to having a homeownership counselor and 2 separate real estate agencies that are shepherding the buyers through the process. Just a little bit about home economics. We are starting the purchase price at $180 with a down payment of 3.5% and closing costs at 3%. It's just about $12,000 to our buyer, and the city of Maryland has grants upwards of $22,000 to cover those costs. Assuming a 4% interest rate and 30-year term, our owners will have an $800 mortgage. Factoring in utilities, and these are actually conservative estimates, your total monthly payments are about $1,400, but these houses are really big, so we're probably going to convert some of them into 2 units. So the owner owns the whole building, will have rental income. This further subsidizes their mortgage to make it really affordable. So even without the rental unit, it's affordable to people making under $60,000 a year, and with the rental unit, it's affordable to people making $31,000 a year. This is our development team. We have a general contractor, an architect with over 30 years of experience, a dedicated title agency, a legal team that's helping me draft my private placement memorandum and my term sheet. We have really strong support from the City of Baltimore and State of Maryland housing departments, and they just want to see that I raise the capital before essentially, giving me the properties to get started on. And I've built out a team of wraparound services to actually provide support to the buyers and to community members. In terms of capital stack, I'm a visual learner, so I like to do visual representation. So per house, our all-in costs are just under $300,000 to renovate. And this kind of gives you a segmentation of how those costs are distributed. So the acquisition costs actually aren't that high. They range from $1,000 per home to $20,000 per home. It's really the construction costs that represent the largest bit of the capital stack. And what's really important here is in this $295,000, I've included the return to investors, and I'll talk a bit about why. And then in terms of what are the sources of those funds, well, one comes from the sales price to the homeowner, but then the other comes from state and city subsidies and tax credits and a bit from philanthropy. And so in terms of how the raise will be used, I'm raising the $1 million, what I'm calling like an equity pool or an equity line of credit that essentially goes to the acquisition of the homes. Then a $1 to $2 million rotating line of construction credit, which goes to the construction of the homes, that produces a livable house. Once that home is sold, because we have the returns and the cost of debt built into it, it goes back into those equity pools so that we can continue to recycle and do the 96 homes over 8 years. And then, but we also are able to distribute to our investors their return on an annual basis, as well as help me pay my student loans. And what's really important here is that the levers for return, or the levers for the margin, is really in keeping our construction costs low, but also the amount of subsidy that we can raise. And that's why I've structured it as a promissory note at a capped 8%, because I don't want to get into the position where I need to be scrambling to either extract more money from the people in the neighborhood or having to beg for more subsidy. It's kind of built in, and the reliance on subsidy will actually decrease over time. And so just really quick, I have 0 seconds left, but I'm gonna go through this.
Take the extra minute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so around acquisition, we want to actually front load the acquisition of properties, because one of the fears is that once people see that we're being successful, speculative investors will essentially come in and push up prices. So we want to acquire as many properties up front as we can, but we're also assuming that we'll take down properties at a conservative rate of 12 homes per year. This could go up just depending on, financial support. Our effective revenue from the sales of the homes in the first year will be just about $2 million, and this takes out the sales tax and our like the real estate agent's commission on selling the home, and then we're also counting that revenue, the subsidy, as revenue of $1.7 million. We then subtract the development costs, which are essentially the hard costs to the construction line of credit. That leaves us with a net profit for equity distribution of $888,000, again, of which is built in already the return to investors. So at that point, we replenish the equity pool of $156,000. That goes into redeploying into the neighborhood. We pay our investors their annual pref of $80,000. We take out that the principal of the original $1 million and put it on the side. You can either have that paid back annually or have it paid back at the end of 8 years. That'll change your returns, but it's an option. I have the developer's fee. I'd like to hire an employee, get myself some office space, but we still have a cushion of $282,000 per year, and it kind of goes up that we could have a conversation around a true equity play, or we could say, let's actually just pump that back into the community and do some beautification of parks. And so just in terms of how investors get paid back, so that's the initial investment of $1 million. Again, the annual preferred return. Here, I'm modeling out that you'll get paid back at the end of the 8 years, because that maximizes your total return. And the IRR is 8% and an equity multiple of 1.64%, or X, 1.64X. So that is Parity, and I'll open up to questions.
Wait, you haven't heard the judges yet. Maybe we didn't like it. Come on. Thank you.
We'll try. I'm getting up too.
Guys. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Don't cry. Don't cry. You did a great job.
Now, before you sit down, pull out your wallet.
Right. Yeah, Bree, you should get the collection bucket out. Stop walking around.
Clapping is good, money is better.
Yeah. Bree, I don't think you're going to have any problem raising your $1 million. You might have just done it here, but I love the spirit that you're bringing into this business plan. It's because of people like you that transformative city change happens. And even if your forecast is 50% off, you're still starting the process, and you'll raise more money and pick it up. I mean, this is something that will work one way or the other. Nothing ever works according to formula, but you're a startup and you've got the right idea. So Arctaris focuses on inner cities. We recently committed $22 million to low-income census tracts in Baltimore, and we're doing it in partnership with Able Foundation and Neighborhood Impact Investment Fund. And yes, and our focus is job creation, but in your circle, and I couldn't exactly decide which neighborhood you were in, but right in the middle of the circle on Schroeder, we're working on a grocery store in a food desert across the street from Center West. So these are the types of things that we're working on. I mean, I'd love to learn more about what you're doing and to see if we can be complementary somehow. I think that the question really becomes, if it costs $200 a square foot to build low-income housing, you're not going to be able to recoup that off of rent or unit sales alone. Is there enough LIHTC and philanthropy to be able to make that work? These things are, I mean, you're in an opportunity zone. So there's a lot of money floating around to do opportunity zone investments for these types of projects. But there's always been a financing gap. Opportunity zones and LIHTC didn't solve the gap. There's still more that you need to fill that. So I think it's promising to see that in that neighborhood there are rents going up to $2,500, $2,800 a month now, and that's frightening too, because the families that have been there for a long time, they're facing gentrification and displacement. So I think Baltimore has such a long-standing foundation history that there will be a lot of support for what you're doing there. And if you can prove that it works in Baltimore, ICICs in 16 other cities, and there are even more places where you could bring this model. So I applaud you in thinking this through so carefully.
Thank you.
So I am a recovering real estate developer, which I did affordable housing for about 15 years in another life. And so I think the comments are correct. The deals don't naturally sort of work in most cases. So I think how you approach this and the way that you sort of look at, I wouldn't call it extracting, but pulling profits from where you can from each of the stacks. So one quick way is someone, when you get your team together, should just become a real estate broker, right? So at least you can get the broker fees back in to help run the business, and you can get a little piece of that as well as your developer fee. And sometimes those brokerage fees may keep you going while you continue to sort of build the pipeline. I think place is incredibly important, right? I think it's Dave Chappelle who says his parents did just well enough for him to live with poor white folks, you know, and that was enough to sort of put him on a trajectory. And so changing these neighborhoods and the way that you're looking at it and understanding how gentrification works, I think is incredibly important. There is this push and pull of the good work that you do can actually cause the gentrification. And you sort of highlighted that, so you have to sort of think about that, because you don't want to make these communities in isolation or in secrecy, so word will get around and people come in. One of the questions I have is, how do you maintain the affordability, right? So the first family moves in, neighborhood goes gangbusters, and someone walks and knocks on the door and says, I want to give you $600,000 for your house. Now the homeowner said, wow, this is great, I made an investment, and yet that changed the neighborhood. And this is only a phenomenon in poor communities. Anywhere else, that's a real estate deal, right? But in our community, somehow it's looked upon sadly about us sort of doing that. So one question is there something within the deed restrictions or something that maintains affordability over the long term?
Yeah, so we're putting in deed covenants that essentially caps the resale value. So it allows for steady appreciation, but we also recognize that doubling or tripling the value that you originally bought it for in 1 or 2 years actually is not a healthy. It's not healthy for anybody. It's not healthy in Harlem or in Brooklyn. It's not healthy in Baltimore. There's also a little bit of an education piece around, so a lot of the homeowners in our neighborhood are elders, and part of me wants them to be able to cash out on their home and maybe go move into an assisted living facility. But another piece is kind of explaining that, look, if you actually just hold on to it and learn from history, learn from what happened in Harlem and Brooklyn, stay in the community, will help you maybe refi so you can get some of the equity out of your home. You'll actually, not only will it benefit you, but it'll benefit the younger generation so that they still have neighborhoods that are affordable to live in. And one thing I didn't talk about here is I'm partnering with the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Services team. So they are attorneys that provide pro bono support to lower income folks. So they're helping us in 2 ways. One of the things we're concerned about is unlawful eviction. So oftentimes what happens is slumlords have been barely maintaining their properties for years. When they see the neighborhood start to transition, they essentially kick people out, double the rent. So we're working with this pro bono law team to provide legal support to people who are facing unlawful eviction. And then we're also working with existing homeowners to do what's called homesteading of your taxes, which allows you to cap the rate that your property taxes go up, so that when the overall value of the neighborhood goes up and your property value goes up, your property taxes don't go up proportionately. And then we're also working with MVLS around deeds. So helping existing homeowners actually make sure that they're on the deeds to their properties, because oftentimes what happens is your grandma passed on the home to you and you've been living in it, paying the mortgage, but you actually are not on the deed. And so if you miss a payment or you're behind on your taxes, they can come take your home and you have no recourse. So part of what we do is just around thinking more holistically about how to be intentional developers.
So 2 quick questions, and then I know the others want to have comments as well. 96 homes in 8 years is incredibly slow. Okay. Dynamic markets will happen, there'll be a recession, something will happen along that line, so somehow seeing that makes me a little nervous, trying to project out that far. And then also I would look to see if there is a land bank or something in Baltimore that could hold those 96 properties for you, clear the taxes, and maintain them, and then you can get them from the land bank in a rate or a chunk that's reasonable for you to turn them around. That would just be my comment.
So, Bree, I thought this was excellent, right? And I think for everybody out in the audience and all the people who participate, I mean, the biggest key to any investment is finding people who like and understand the investment, right? And like Brian said, already it sounds like this is something he does, right? And so real estate, luckily, is one of these investments that a lot of people get. And we get it because it's a building involved. That model you put out, we all can put that on Excel ourselves and play with that ourselves and play with the return. And we all understand how it works, right? And you were very thorough in how you laid it out, right? That Morgan Stanley training looked like it came in handy. You've laid that out real nicely. And so, and the questions will be, and they've been raised, is because we can play with this, we can start to, well, what if the subsidy is 50% of what she thinks? What does that mean to my return? Well, what if the construction cost is 25% higher? What does that mean? And so I would encourage you to scenario some of this stuff, right? So that people can get a sense of, well, you know, how good and bad can it be if things don't go as planned? I mean, one thing, and many of us have been involved in this, you know, it never goes the way you've laid it out. It's either better or worse, right? And just laying out to people what the scenarios might look like. And then the other thing, in addition to selling, if it does successful, because I live in Harlem, I watched that. Luckily, I got there in time. So I got there in '98 while all of that was happening. And I'm very pleased with the way my investment has worked out. But also giving people the ability, like renting, like how are you going to treat that? Because there are a lot of, in Harlem, people have done that. Like they bought into something subsidized, it grew, their family situation changed, they had to move out. So the building restricted renting and forced people to sell because people didn't want the place full of renters. I don't know how you're thinking about that, but that's something else. You gotta, what kind of flexibility you're gonna give people to maintain the value, but at the same time, if their circumstances have changed, they don't want to sell, but they still got to pay the mortgage somehow and need a renting opportunity. But I thought this was very good.
Very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, so for us, we are also putting in the deed covenant that it has to be an owner-occupied space. And that is because, again, we really want to create homeowners. We know that when there are homeowners in a neighborhood, just neighborhoods do better. But that's for 10 years. And so after the 10th year, if you wanted to rent it out, you could. And there's also a rental component when we convert the homes into 2 families. So it's something that we'd have to work with. But for right now, it is like a very firm line in the sand that I draw that you have to live in the home.
Yep.
Bree, you are an inspiration, thank you.
Thank you.
And you've demonstrated for us the proper marrying of responsible public policy and passion. And I truly appreciate that.
That's right.
Anybody here from Detroit?
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Okay. There's a template for you, okay? And the city of Baltimore is in its rough period right now. But Detroit is an absolute template for you, and I'd ask you to go visit, take advantage of those connections that exist there, and you'll see similar, not the same, but similar kind of enterprises. Do you know the Hamden neighborhood? So I have to ask you the million-dollar question. Cafe Hun or Food Market?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't been to either.
You haven't been to either, okay. Well, make it a point to have somebody take you there. Okay. My point is that was once a neighborhood that wasn't quite as poorly depicted as you did, but there's an intensive single investment in that neighborhood that really has afforded it to be a thriving entity right now. There's some folks in the audience right now from DC, Menkidi Real Estate Development. Have you talked with them?
Yes, I have.
There are some lessons that they can help you with as well. I'd leave you with a couple of other things. You might consider that there's a financing scheme called New Markets Tax Credits that would absolutely work in a very defined corporate environment, perhaps in partnership with folks like Menkidi or others who already exist, that could absolutely pull this off and pull it off in a much quicker scale than William was suggesting. Too long for too little number of homes. And you might consider that, and I'd be happy to help walk you through that. We happen to be a New Markets Tax Credit provider, although we don't work in the Baltimore or Maryland marketplaces. We'll know some folks who do that. And then lastly, I think you might, second lastly, there's a mayoral campaign going on in Baltimore right now. Somehow get some profile and turn this into a campaign issue. And when you do that, you'd be surprised at how many other doors open up for you, because that gap between real cost and what you can sell for exists, and you need to fill it with part of that political process in terms of highlight. Lastly, you might think about taking your personal story, that single experience that you had, and replicating that, using that as a teaching opportunity for others who don't have to wait for a real estate development entity to do it, but be able to singularize it. Each one of those 6 friends that you had, and those 30 people who would like to buy, some portion of them can be prophets in their hometown, that they would accept that challenge to do what you did. And all of a sudden that $295,000 in cost to $180 in sale narrows significantly, because like you put sweat, equity, and time into the enterprise.
Yeah.
Go, sister, go.
Thank you.
Sorry to leave you.
No, not at all. Actually, there are so many experts on the stage, I would be remiss if I tried to even come close to that level of guidance. But what I will give you some feedback on is the overall presentation itself. I loved the way that you introduced the history. I think it is apt to comment on the fact that you are pre-revenue, so you can't comment so deeply on the numbers, but you still had a lot of numbers. I would caution you, and it was mentioned earlier, about so many pie-in-the-sky what-if projections. They're great, and it shows clearly how you're going to get the money back for the investor, but it really counts on every variable going your way exactly as you planned it. And so it was said that scenario it out a little bit. You're a visual learner. I would like to see that page that is so jam-packed with numbers, broken out into best case, probable case, maybe worst case, or show me what the risk is here, because it is so exciting that it's easy to get swept up in it. And I think bringing your investors back to earth to say, look, I get it. I get that nothing ever happens perfectly. So this is what I hope for. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and make that story a little bit more clear. But again, I think you're not going to have any challenges making this come to life. Well, getting your $1 million. I'm sure you'll have plenty of challenges.
And I think you embody the phrase, sometimes the hand we need is at the end of our own arm, that we don't have to wait for others to come into our community to sort of save us, that we can sort of move on our own. And I think that that's incredibly important, because we often are waiting for someone else to save us, some kind of government, some sort of, in Chicago, the Olympics was coming. It was going to save the neighborhood. It didn't happen. Neighborhoods thought they were going to get the Obama library. It went to another neighborhood. And at some point, you've got to stop waiting around and move into action. And so I just applaud you for taking the necessary steps to move forward and create real change.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I almost always agree with Mark on things. I deeply respect his advice and feedback, but there was one piece of horrible advice he said: stay out of the mayor's race. For those of you who've been in ICIC a few years, do not go to City Hall.
We're going to do this old-fashioned way. If you would put your money into Firebrand Artisan bread, please clap. If your money would go to InvisaWear, please clap. And finally, if you were going to put your money into Parity, please clap and go see Bree. All right, Bree, please stand up. You are our winner this year. Thank you, everybody.